When the Johnson family bravely rescues stray dogs from a crowded market, they embark on an emotional journey filled with unexpected heartbreak and challenges. What unfolds next will leave you deeply moved and yearning to see their story through. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. The sun was shining brightly over the town as the Johnson family prepared for their Saturday outing. The Johnsons were a happy family who loved spending time together. There was Mr. Johnson, a tall man with a kind smile who worked as a teacher. Mrs. Johnson was a warm and caring woman who ran a small bakery in town. Their two children, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Ben, were excited for the day ahead. "Are you ready for the market, kids?" Mrs. Johnson asked, placing the last of the freshly baked cookies in the window of their car. "Yes, Mom." Lily and Ben replied in unison, their eyes sparkling with excitement. They loved going to the downtown market on weekends. It was a place full of colors, sounds, and delicious smells that made their mouths water. As they drove down the street, the Johnson family could see the market bustling with activity. People were setting up their stalls, arranging fruits, vegetables, handmade crafts, and tasty treats. The air was filled with the sounds of chatter, laughter, and the occasional bark of a dog. The market was a favorite spot for the family, a place where they could spend hours exploring and enjoying each other's company. When they arrived, they parked the car and walked hand in hand toward the entrance. Lily and Ben couldn't wait to see what new things the market had to offer this weekend. They loved trying new foods, finding unique gifts, and watching the street performers entertain the crowd. As they wandered through the stalls, Mr. Johnson chatted with a fruit vendor, while Mrs. Johnson picked out some fresh vegetables for dinner. Lily and Ben marveled at the vibrant colors of the flowers and the variety of goods on display. It was a perfect day, filled with happiness and the promise of fun. But as they continued to explore, Lily noticed something that made her heart sink. Near the back of the market, away from the bustling stalls, there were several stray dogs wandering around. They looked thin and tired, their eyes pleading for help. Some of them had matted fur, and one of the dogs was limping noticeably, its paw hurt. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing toward the dogs. "Mom, look. Those dogs look so sad. Can we help them?" Mrs. Johnson glanced in the direction Lily was pointing and felt a pang of sadness. "Oh, those poor dogs," she said softly. "They must be hungry and scared." Ben looked up and saw the limping dog. "That one can't walk right," he observed, concern etched on his face. Mr. Johnson walked over to see what the children were talking about. When he saw the stray dogs, he felt a surge of compassion. "They need our help," he said, kneeling down to get a closer look. "These dogs are lost and probably hungry. We should do something." Mrs. Johnson nodded in agreement. "We can't just leave them here. They deserve better." The family exchanged determined looks. They knew they couldn't ignore the plight of these animals. The Johnsons had always been kind-hearted, and helping those in need was something they took to heart. "We should take them to the vet," Mr. Johnson suggested. "Maybe some of them have injuries or need medical attention." "That's a good idea," Mrs. Johnson agreed. "But we need to make sure we can safely transport them without causing them more stress." Lily and Ben were already thinking of ways to help. Lily remembered seeing some blankets and old towels in the car. "We can use these to make them comfortable," she said, pulling out a stack of blankets. Ben nodded eagerly. "And I can help by calming them down. I know how to talk to scared animals." With their plan in mind, the Johnson family set to work. Mr. Johnson carefully approached the limping dog, speaking in a gentle voice. The dog looked up with big, sad eyes, clearly in pain but sensing the family's kindness. "Hey there, buddy," Mr. Johnson said softly. "We're here to help you." Mrs. Johnson gathered some food and water, placing it near the dogs to help them feel more at ease. Lily and Ben worked together to create a makeshift shelter using the blankets and towels, ensuring the dogs had a comfortable space in the back of their car. As they worked, the family could see the gratitude in the dogs' eyes. The limping dog, whom they decided to name Max, seemed particularly touched by their kindness. Max slowly approached, allowing Mr. Johnson to gently examine his injured paw. "It looks like he hurt his leg," Mr. Johnson said, carefully assessing the injury. "We need to get him to the vet as soon as possible." With Max and a few other dogs settled safely in the car, the Johnson family prepared to leave the market. They knew they couldn't take all the stray dogs with them, but helping even a few meant the world to them. As they drove away from the bustling market, the Johnsons couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. They were happy to be able to help the dogs, but they also felt a sense of sadness knowing that there were still more animals in need. Max lay quietly in the back seat, resting his injured leg, while Lily and Ben looked out the window, watching the world go by. The drive to the vet was quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts. They hoped that Max would recover quickly and that he would find a safe and loving home. The other dogs in the car seemed to sense the family's hope and trust, finding comfort in their presence. When they arrived at the vet's office, the Johnson family quickly got to work. Mr. Johnson spoke with the veterinarian, explaining Max's injury and the need for immediate care. Mrs. Johnson handled the other dogs, ensuring they were comfortable and safe while waiting for their turn. Lily and Ben watched anxiously as the vet examined Max. They could see the worry in their parents' faces, but they also saw the determination to help their new furry friends. It was a reminder of how much the family cared for those in need, no matter how big or small. After what felt like hours, the vet finally came out with good news. "Max is going to be okay," she announced. "He just needs some rest and a little time to heal. We'll keep him here for a few days to make sure he recovers fully." The Johnson family breathed a collective sigh of relief. They were grateful that Max would be okay and that they had been able to help him. But they also knew that their work wasn't done. There were still other dogs that needed care and love. As they left the vet's office, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the town. The Johnson family drove home, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. They knew that by rescuing these stray dogs, they were making a difference, even if it was just a small one. When they arrived home, Mrs. Johnson immediately started preparing a meal while Mr. Johnson checked on the remaining dogs. Lily and Ben spent the evening playing with Max, who was starting to feel better thanks to the vet's care. The bond between the family and the dogs grew stronger each day, and they felt a deep sense of purpose in their mission to help those in need. That night, as the Johnson family settled down for bed, Lily couldn't help but think about the stray dogs they had rescued. She wondered how many more animals were out there, alone and hungry, just waiting for someone to care for them. Ben, too, felt a strong desire to help, dreaming of a day when every stray dog would find a loving home. As they drifted off to sleep, the Johnson family knew that their journey was just beginning. They were determined to continue their rescue efforts, providing comfort and care to any stray dogs they encountered. Little did they know, their decision to help those dogs would lead to many more challenges and emotional moments in the days to come. But for now, they were content, knowing that they had made a difference in the lives of Max and the other stray dogs. It was the beginning of a heartfelt adventure that would bring them closer together as a family and teach them the true meaning of compassion and kindness. The Johnson family arrived home just as the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Their car was filled with the soft sounds of barking and whining from the several stray dogs they had rescued earlier that day. Inside the car, there were 4 dogs: Bella, a playful golden retriever; Charlie, a shy little terrier; Luna, a gentle greyhound; and Max, the limping dog that had caught young Lily's attention. As soon as they stepped inside, Mrs. Johnson quickly took charge. She opened the back doors of the car to let the dogs out. The dogs looked around, sniffing and trying to understand their new surroundings. Mrs. Johnson guided them to a spacious room in the house that they had set aside just for the dogs. She filled bowls with fresh water and laid out bowls of food. The dogs eagerly ate, their tails wagging in gratitude. Mr. Johnson started to clean up the car, making sure there was no leftover food that might attract pests. Meanwhile, Lily, their 8-year-old daughter, was already kneeling beside Max. She gently patted his head, noticing his limp. Max looked up at her with big, sad eyes that seemed to understand her kindness. "Don't worry, Max," Lily whispered softly. "We're going to take care of you." Lily's older brother, Jake, walked into the room carrying a bag of toys he had found at the store. He started to play with Bella, throwing a ball across the room. Bella chased after it happily, her golden fur shining in the evening light. Jake laughed, enjoying the simple joy of playing with the dog. As night fell, the Johnson family worked together to make the dogs feel at home. They set up soft beds with blankets for each dog and placed them in different corners of the room to give everyone some personal space. Mrs. Johnson took Max to the bathroom to check his paw. She carefully cleaned the wound and wrapped it with a soft bandage. Max winced a little but didn't pull away, trusting her completely. Lily watched her mother with concern. "Do you think Max will be okay?" she asked. Mrs. Johnson smiled reassuringly. "Yes, sweetie. He just needs some rest and care. We'll make sure he heals soon." After everything was settled, the family gathered in the living room. The dogs began to relax, curling up on their beds or finding comfortable spots to lie down. The room was filled with a sense of calm and warmth as everyone took a moment to appreciate the new additions to their family. Later that night, Lily lay in her bed, trying to sleep. Max lay close to her, his head resting gently on her pillow. As she drifted off, her mind filled with dreams about Max. In her dream, Max was running freely through a vast, open field. He chased after butterflies, his limp completely gone. He was happy and carefree, playing with other dogs and enjoying the sunshine. But suddenly, dark clouds began to gather, and the sky turned gray. Max looked around, confused and scared. He tried to run, but something was holding him back. The field started to close in, and Max felt trapped. Lily woke up with a start, her heart pounding. She sat up, looking around her room, and saw Max lying beside her, still fast asleep. Lily felt a knot in her stomach. She reached out and gently touched Max's paw, remembering his limp. "I hope you're okay, Max," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. The next morning, the Johnson family woke up to the sound of birds singing outside. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the room feel bright and cheerful. Lily got out of bed and went to check on the dogs. Max was still asleep, but he looked peaceful. She patted his head softly and smiled, feeling a little better after her dream. At breakfast, the family discussed their plans for the day. They decided to create a comfortable space for the dogs in their backyard, where the dogs could have more room to move around and play. Mr. Johnson offered to build some dog houses, while Mrs. Johnson talked about getting more food and supplies. Jake was excited to help, suggesting they set up an obstacle course for Bella and Charlie to play with. "They'll love running through tunnels and jumping over small hurdles," he said enthusiastically. Lily, on the other hand, focused on Max. She wanted to make sure he was comfortable and happy. She spent the morning talking to him, telling him stories about her day at school and her favorite books. Max listened quietly, his eyes following her every movement. In the afternoon, the family got to work. Mr. Johnson and Jake built sturdy dog houses in the backyard, painting them with bright colors to make them look cheerful. Mrs. Johnson organized the supplies, ensuring that each dog had enough food and water. Lily helped by arranging blankets and toys, making sure everything was just right for Max. As the day went on, the backyard began to transform into a welcoming space for the dogs. Bella and Charlie ran around, playing with their new toys, while Luna lounged in her cozy bed, enjoying the warm sunshine. Max watched them from his spot, occasionally limping towards Lily for a little extra attention. That evening, the family held a small welcome party in the backyard to celebrate their new friends. They invited a few neighbors and friends to meet the dogs and share in their joy. The guests were touched by the Johnsons' kindness and the stories behind each dog's rescue. One neighbor, Mrs. Green, shared a story about how she had seen the dogs wandering the market earlier that day. "It breaks my heart to see so many beautiful animals without a home," she said sadly. I'm so glad you decided to help them. Another guest, Mr. Brown, offered to take Charlie to the vet for a checkup. I know a great vet who can make sure he's healthy, he said warmly. The family gratefully accepted his offer, feeling supported by their community. As the night grew darker, the Johnson family sat around a bonfire in the backyard. They roasted marshmallows and shared stories about their day. The dogs nestled close to them, feeling safe and loved. Lily looked around at her family and the happy dogs, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. But as the night went on, Lily couldn't shake the feeling of unease from her dream. She kept thinking about Max running free and then being trapped. She wondered if there was something more to his limp, something that needed their help beyond just healing his paw. Before going to bed, Lily decided to talk to Max one more time. She gently stroked his head and said, "I had a strange dream, Max. I hope everything is okay." Max looked up at her with his big, understanding eyes. He nudged her hand gently, as if to say that he was all right and that they would figure things out together. The next morning, Lily woke up early, eager to help her family with the dogs. She found Max lying near the doghouse, looking a bit restless. Lily approached him slowly, sitting down beside him. She noticed that Max was limping more than usual and seemed to be in pain again. "Maybe we need to see a vet today," Lily suggested, remembering what Mr. Brown had offered. "What do you think, Dad?" Mr. Johnson nodded, understanding her concern. "That's a good idea, Lily. We want to make sure Max is healthy." The family prepared to take Max to the vet, packing a small bag with his favorite blanket and some treats. As they drove to the vet's office, Lily held Max's paw gently, offering him comfort and support. At the vet's office, Dr. Smith examined Max carefully. After a thorough checkup, she explained, "Max has a sprained paw. It's not too serious, but he will need some rest and a special brace to help him walk without pain." Mrs. Johnson was relieved to hear that Max wasn't seriously injured. "Thank you, Dr. Smith. We'll make sure he gets the care he needs." Dr. Smith smiled kindly. "He's a brave dog. With proper care, he should be back to running around in no time." Back home, the family followed Dr. Smith's instructions, making sure Max rested and wore his brace as needed. Lily spent extra time with him, helping him adjust and making sure he was comfortable. She could see how much Max appreciated her care, and it made her heart swell with love and concern. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, Max rested peacefully by Lily's side. She looked around at her parents and Jake, feeling grateful for their support and love. She knew that taking in these stray dogs was the right thing to do, but she also felt a deep responsibility to make sure they were all safe and happy. That night, Lily had another dream about Max. This time, Max was running through the same field, but it was different. The clouds had cleared, and the sun was shining brightly. Max was running towards her, barking happily. Suddenly, a large fence appeared in front of them, blocking his path. Max tried to jump over it, but he couldn't make it. He turned back, looking sad and tired. Lily woke up with a start once more, her heart heavy. She reached out to touch Max, who was still sleeping soundly beside her. "I don't like these dreams, Max," she said softly. "I just want you to be happy." Throughout the next few days, the Johnson family continued to care for the dogs, each day growing closer to them. Bella became a favorite with Jake, who loved teaching her new tricks. Luna was calm and affectionate, always ready to cuddle up with Mrs. Johnson. Charlie, the shy terrier, slowly began to come out of his shell, finding comfort in the family's gentle care. Max, however, remained Lily's special focus. His limp was improving, but Lily could still see the worry in his eyes. She often wondered about his past and why he was left on the streets. Her curiosity grew, and she felt a strong desire to help him beyond just healing his paw. One afternoon, Lily decided to ask her parents more about Max's mom. "Dad, do you know where Max came from?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. Mrs. Johnson exchanged a glance with Mr. Johnson before answering. "We don't know much, Lily. He was just wandering the market, and we decided to bring him home because he needed help. Lily wasn't satisfied with the answer. There must be more to his story. Maybe he has a family that's looking for him. Mr. Johnson nodded thoughtfully. That's possible. We can put up some flyers and see if anyone is missing Max. It's important to help him find his way if he has one. Inspired by her parents' support, Lily helped design flyers with Max's picture and their contact information. They printed several copies and started posting them around the neighborhood, hoping to reach anyone who might be looking for him. Days turned into weeks, and life in the Johnson household settled into a comfortable routine. The dogs brought joy and laughter, each one adding their own unique touch to the family's daily life. Bella and Jake's playful antics became a common sight, while Luna's gentle presence provided a sense of calm. Charlie slowly overcame his shyness, becoming more interactive and happy. Max, though, remained a quiet and contemplative presence. Lily couldn't forget her dreams and the unease they brought. She decided to spend more time with Max, hoping to understand his silent plea for help. She would sit beside him, gently stroking his fur and whispering words of comfort. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Lily noticed Max staring intently at something outside the window. Curious, she walked over to see what had caught his attention. Through the window, she saw a group of dogs running freely in a nearby park. They were happy and playful, a stark contrast to the strays she had rescued. Lily felt a pang of sadness and hope. "Look, Dad," she said softly. "They're all so happy. I wish Max could be like that." Mr. Johnson smiled gently. "We're doing our best to make sure Max is happy, Lily. With time and care, he'll be able to run and play just like those dogs." Lily nodded, but she still felt that there was something more she needed to do. She decided to take Max for a walk in the backyard, hoping the fresh air and exercise would help him feel better. As they walked together, Lily talked to him about her day and her dreams, trying to ease her own worries by focusing on Max's well-being. During their walk, Lily noticed that Max seemed to be paying more attention to something in the distance. His ears perked up, and he started to sniff the air, sensing something that Lily couldn't see. Curious, Lily followed his gaze and saw a small, worn-out dog collar lying on the ground near the fence. "Look, Max," she said, pointing to the collar. "Where did you find that?" Max approached the collar cautiously, sniffing it before giving it a gentle nudge with his nose. Lily picked it up and examined it closely. There was a name engraved on the tag, Buddy. A spark of hope lit up in Lily's eyes. Buddy must be someone's lost dog. Maybe he knows Buddy and is trying to tell us something. Determined to help, Lily showed the collar to her parents. "We need to find out who Buddy is and see if we can help him too." Mrs. Johnson nodded in agreement. "That's a great idea, Lily. We can include Buddy in our flyers and see if anyone is missing him as well." The next day, the Johnson family expanded their efforts, creating new flyers that included both Max and Buddy. They printed more copies and posted them around the neighborhood, spreading the word about the two lost dogs. They also reached out to local animal shelters and veterinarians, hoping someone would recognize Buddy's collar. Days passed, and the Johnsons continued to care for their dogs, but they couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Max's story. Lily spent extra time with him, hoping he would show her any signs of knowing about Buddy or any other memories that could help them understand his past. One afternoon, as Lily sat beside Max, stroking his fur, she noticed something unusual. Max began to whimper softly and nudged her hand with his nose, then slowly moved towards the door. Lily followed him, puzzled by his behavior. They walked to the front door, and Max paused, looking back at Lily as if urging her to come outside. Lily opened the door, and they stepped into the backyard. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds singing and children playing nearby. Max walked towards the fence, sniffing the air and looking intently at something on the other side. Suddenly, a dog started barking loudly from the opposite side of the fence. It was a large, energetic dog that Lily didn't recognize. The dog barked and wagged its tail, running back and forth as if trying to get Max's attention. Max stood still, staring at the other dog, his limp momentarily forgotten. Lily watched in amazement as Max seemed to communicate with the other dog. There was a connection, a silent understanding between them. The other dog approached the fence and sat down, looking at Max with familiarity. It was clear that they knew each other. Lily felt a surge of excitement and hope. "Max, do you know him?" she asked softly. Max let out a soft bark and wagged his tail, showing that he did recognize the other dog. Lily realized that Max wasn't just any stray, he had a friend, someone important from his past. Determined to find out more, Lily decided to take action. She asked her parents if they could reach out to the local animal community, hoping someone might know who Buddy was and where he was. Mr. Johnson agreed, saying he would make some phone calls and check with local shelters. That evening, the family gathered around the kitchen table, discussing their next steps. They had received several responses to their flyers, but none mentioned Buddy. However, one local shelter had a name that stood out: Greenfield Animal Rescue. They decided to visit the shelter the next day, hoping to find more information about Buddy. The following morning, the Johnson family loaded Max and the other dogs into the car and drove to Greenfield Animal Rescue. The shelter was a large, welcoming building filled with animals of all kinds, each looking for a loving home. They approached the front desk and spoke with the receptionist, a kind woman named Miss Parker. "Hi, I'm here to ask about a dog named Buddy," Mrs. Johnson said politely. "We found his collar near our house and wanted to see if anyone has reported him missing." Miss Parker took the collar and examined it closely. "Let me check our records," she said, typing on her computer. After a few moments, she looked up with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any records of a dog named Buddy being surrendered here. However, we can put out a notice and see if anyone comes forward with information." The Johnsons thanked Miss Parker and decided to leave some flyers at the shelter, hoping that someone might recognize Buddy. They spent some time talking to the staff and learning more about the other dogs in need of homes. As they left the shelter, Lily felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. She wondered if they would ever find out more about Buddy and Max's past. Back at home, the family continued their search, visiting local parks and talking to neighbors about Buddy. They also kept a close eye on Max, watching for any signs that might reveal more about his past or his connection to Buddy. One evening, as the family sat together in the backyard, Max suddenly stood up and began to bark loudly. Lily looked up, her heart racing. "What is it, Max?" she asked, rushing to his side. Max led them to a small shed at the back of the yard that they hadn't noticed before. Inside the shed, they found old toys, a worn blanket, and a few more collars. Among them was another collar with the name Buddy engraved on it. The family felt a wave of emotion as they realized that Max and Buddy had shared the same home once. Mrs. Johnson picked up one of Buddy's old toys and held it gently. "It looks like Max and Buddy were very close," she said softly. "They must have been best friends." Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I wish we could find Buddy and bring him back to us," she whispered. Just then, the doorbell rang. Mr. Johnson went to answer it and stood on the porch with a worried look on his face. "It's a woman," he said, bringing her inside. "She says she's looking for Buddy." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor who had recently lost her dog, Buddy. She explained how Buddy had disappeared after the market renovation and how she had been searching everywhere for him. Lily stepped forward, holding the collar and toy. "We found Buddy's collar and some of his things," she said gently. "We think Max and Buddy were best friends." Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears as she saw the items. "Oh, Buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've been so worried about him. I thought I'd never see him again." The Johnson family felt a surge of relief and happiness. "We've been trying to find out what happened to him," Mr. Johnson said kindly. "It seems like Max was Buddy's best friend." Mrs. Thompson looked at Max, who was wagging his tail happily beside Lily. "Thank you so much for taking care of him," she said gratefully. Buddy was very special to me, and it means the world to know he's safe. Lily smiled through her tears. We're glad we could help. We want to make sure both Max and Buddy are happy. Mrs. Thompson knelt down and petted Max gently. Buddy missed you so much, she said softly. I think Max felt the same way. The family felt a deep connection as they listened to Mrs. Thompson's story. They learned that Buddy had been a playful and loving dog who brought joy to everyone he met. His sudden disappearance had left a hole in Mrs. Thompson's heart, and Max's rescue had brought back memories of their time together. Lily hugged Max tightly, feeling a sense of closure and hope. We'll make sure Max is happy here, she promised. And we're glad Buddy is safe with you. Mrs. Thompson smiled through her tears. Thank you for everything you've done. It means more than you can imagine. As Mrs. Thompson left, the Johnson family felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. They had not only rescued the stray dogs, but also helped reunite a beloved pet with his owner. The bonds between the family and the dogs grew stronger, each one finding a place of love and safety in their new home. That night, as the family sat together in the backyard, they reflected on their journey so far. The dogs had brought unexpected joy and challenges, but they had also taught them the true meaning of compassion and responsibility. Lily looked around at her parents and Jake, feeling grateful for their support. She knew that their lives had changed forever, but she was ready to face whatever came next with her family and their furry friends by her side. Max lay beside her, his eyes full of trust and love. Lily felt a deep connection to him, knowing that their bond was unbreakable. She knew that together, they could overcome any obstacle and continue to make a difference for the dogs in need. As the stars twinkled in the night sky, the Johnson family felt a sense of hope and determination. They had found their new home, not just for themselves, but for the dogs who needed them. And with each passing day, their hearts grew fuller, knowing that they were making the world a little kinder, one rescue at a time. The sun was just starting to rise as the Johnson family sat around the kitchen table, sipping their morning coffee. Lily, their young daughter, was quietly drawing pictures of the dogs they had rescued the day before. Her father, Mr. Johnson, was busy typing on his laptop, looking for ways to help find new homes for the strays. Mrs. Johnson was preparing breakfast, her mind still focused on the stray dogs they had taken in. We need to find out why there are so many stray dogs around the market, Mr. Johnson said, breaking the morning silence. He looked up from his laptop, concern etched on his face. There must be something causing this. Lily looked up from her drawing and nodded. Maybe they were all scared and ran away from something, she suggested softly. Mrs. Johnson placed a plate of pancakes in front of Lily and smiled. That's a good thought, honey. Let's see if we can find out more. After breakfast, the family decided to visit the market again. They wanted to understand why so many dogs were left alone and hungry. As they walked through the busy stalls, they noticed empty water bowls and leftover food scattered around. It was clear that the dogs had been there for a while, trying to survive. Mr. Johnson approached one of the stall owners, a kind-looking man named Mr. Lee. Excuse me, Mr. Lee, he began. We're trying to help the stray dogs around the market. Do you know why there are so many here? Mr. Lee sighed and rubbed his temples. It's the new renovations, he explained. They started cleaning up and moving things around. A lot of people left quickly, and some dogs got scared and didn't know where to go. Lily listened intently, her eyes wide with concern. Did someone hurt the dogs? She asked quietly. Mr. Lee shook his head. No, but some of them were injured by the changes. One dog in particular, Max, got hurt because a vendor wasn't careful with their equipment. Hearing Max's name made Lily's heart ache. She had grown so close to Max since they brought him home. His limp was a constant reminder of his pain, and she worried about him every day. After talking to Mr. Lee, the Johnson family decided to visit the local animal shelter. They hoped to find out more about the stray dogs and maybe discover how they could help even more. At the shelter, they met a friendly worker named Ms. Ramirez, who listened to their story with empathy. We're doing our best to take care of the dogs that come to us, Ms. Ramirez said. But with the market renovations, more dogs have been abandoned. It's been tough to keep up with all of them. Mr. Johnson felt a surge of frustration. There has to be a better way to handle this, he insisted. These dogs deserve to be safe and loved. Ms. Ramirez nodded. We agree. Maybe you could help us by spreading the word and encouraging others to adopt these dogs or support the shelter in other ways. As they left the shelter, the Johnson family felt a mix of determination and worry. They knew they had to do more to help the stray dogs, but they also knew it wouldn't be easy. That afternoon, Mr. Johnson decided to investigate further. He returned to the market to talk to more vendors and gather information. As he walked through the stalls, he noticed a small group of people whispering among themselves. Curious, he approached them cautiously. Hi, I'm Mr. Johnson, he introduced himself. I'm trying to understand why so many dogs are here and how we can help. One of the vendors, a stern woman named Mrs. Thompson, looked up sharply. We're just trying to run our businesses, she replied curtly. These dogs are a nuisance. They scare customers away. Mr. Johnson felt his frustration grow. But these are living creatures that need care and love, he countered. Isn't there a way we can work together to take care of them? Mrs. Thompson crossed her arms. We don't have time for that. The renovations are too chaotic, and we need to focus on our businesses. Feeling defeated, Mr. Johnson thanked her and walked away. He couldn't believe how difficult it was to get people to understand the importance of helping the stray dogs. As he turned a corner, he noticed a familiar face watching him from afar. It was Mr. Thompson, the market owner. He had been overseeing the renovations and seemed to be observing the situation closely. Mr. Johnson felt a knot form in his stomach. What was Mr. Thompson thinking? Later that evening, the family gathered in the living room to discuss what they had learned. Lily hugged Max tightly, feeling his pain and weakness. We have to help him, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Mr. Johnson nodded. We're doing everything we can, but we need more support. I think we should organize a meeting with the market vendors to find a solution. Mrs. Johnson looked thoughtful. Maybe if we can get everyone to see how important this is, they'll be more willing to help. As they talked, Lily spoke up. I had a dream last night that Max was running away because he was scared. I don't want that to happen. Mr. Johnson reached out and gently stroked her hair. We won't let that happen, Lily. We're going to do everything we can to keep Max safe and help the other dogs too. The next day, the Johnson family prepared to hold the meeting at the market. They printed flyers, gathered information from the shelter, and even brought some of the dogs to show how much they needed help. Nervous but determined, they set up a small table near the entrance of the market. As vendors began to arrive, the atmosphere was tense. Some were curious, while others looked annoyed by the interruption to their busy day. Mr. Johnson stood up to speak, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Thank you all for coming, he began. We know you're busy, but we need your help. These dogs are innocent and need our care. They're scared and hungry because of the changes here. We can't leave them like this. He held up a picture of Max, showing his injured leg. This is Max. He was hurt because of the renovations. He's just one of many dogs that need our help. Please, let's work together to find a solution. There was a moment of silence as the vendors listened. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her face stern. We understand your concern, but we have our own problems to deal with. The market is our livelihood. Mr. Johnson nodded respectfully. We get that, and we want to help. Maybe we can find a way to take care of the dogs without disrupting your businesses. We can organize feeding times or set up a small area where they can stay safe. Lily stepped forward, holding Max's leash. Please, we can't do this alone. Max and the other dogs need us. Seeing the genuine emotion in Lily's eyes, some of the vendors began to soften. Mrs. Thompson looked down, her tough exterior wavering. Maybe there is a way, she admitted. But it's going to take effort from all of us. Mr. Johnson felt a glimmer of hope. We're willing to help in any way we can. Let's find a way to make this work for everyone. As the meeting continued, more vendors started to share their own ideas and concerns. Slowly, the tension began to ease, and a sense of collaboration took root. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. They agreed to set up designated feeding times and a small shelter area for the dogs, ensuring they would be cared for without interfering with the market's operations. After the meeting, Mr. Thompson approached the Johnson family. His face was serious, but there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. "I saw how much you care about these dogs," he said quietly. "Maybe we can find a way to help them without hurting our businesses." Mr. Johnson nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We really appreciate your willingness to work together." As the family left the market, they felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't easy, and there was still much to be done, but they had taken a significant step forward. Lily ran ahead, playing with Max, who seemed a little happier now that he knew he wasn't alone. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, there was a renewed sense of hope in the air. They had faced challenges and opposition, but their determination to help the stray dogs had started to make a difference. Max curled up next to Lily, his limp still present but his spirit lifted by the support of his new family. Mr. Johnson looked around the table, seeing the tired but hopeful faces of his loved ones. "We did something good today," he said softly. "We made a difference for these dogs and maybe even for ourselves." Mrs. Johnson reached out and took his hand. "Yes, and we'll keep doing it. For Max and all the other dogs who need us." Lily smiled, hugging Max tightly. "We're a family, and we take care of each other." As they finished their meal, the Johnson family felt closer than ever, united by their shared mission to help those who couldn't speak for themselves. They knew there would be more challenges ahead, but for now, they savored the small victories and the hope that they could create a better world for their furry friends. Later that night, Mr. Johnson sat alone in his study, reviewing the notes from the meeting. He couldn't shake the image of Max's injured leg and the worry in Lily's eyes. Determined to do more, he began brainstorming additional ways to support the stray dogs and prevent future neglect. He thought about reaching out to local animal organizations, organizing community events to raise awareness, and even starting a fundraising campaign to cover medical expenses for the injured dogs. The possibilities seemed endless, and his passion for helping grew stronger with each idea. Meanwhile, Mrs. Johnson was busy sewing blankets and creating comfortable spaces for the dogs at home. She wanted to ensure that each dog felt safe and loved, just like their own family members. Her hands worked tirelessly, driven by the love she felt for the animals and her hope for a better future. Lily, inspired by her parents' efforts, decided to create a scrapbook documenting their journey with the stray dogs. She spent hours drawing pictures, writing stories, and collecting photos of each dog they had rescued. Her scrapbook became a beautiful tribute to their mission, filled with love and compassion. As the days turned into weeks, the Johnson family's efforts began to bear fruit. More vendors joined their cause, contributing food and supplies for the dogs. The market started to become a more welcoming place for both people and animals, fostering a sense of community and care. Max, though still injured, started to regain his strength with the help of the family's love and the support of the community. Lily visited him every day, bringing his favorite toys and comforting him when he felt scared. Their bond grew deeper, and Max became a symbol of the family's unwavering dedication. One afternoon, as Mr. Johnson was visiting the local animal shelter, he received a call from Ms. Ramirez. "Mr. Johnson, we've found a vet who can help Max. They're willing to provide the necessary treatment at a reduced cost," she announced. A wave of relief washed over him. "That's wonderful news. Thank you so much." He rushed home to share the good news with his family. Mrs. Johnson hugged him tightly, and Lily squealed with joy. "We're going to help Max get better." The following week, with the community's support, Mr. Johnson organized a small fundraiser at the market. They set up a booth with information about the stray dogs and the work they were doing to help them. People from all around came to contribute, touched by the Johnson family's story and their dedication. The fundraiser was a success, raising enough money to cover Max's medical expenses and provide additional resources for the other dogs. Mr. Thompson, the market owner, approached the family with a genuine smile. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," he said. "You've shown that compassion and community can make a real difference." Mr. Johnson felt a sense of pride and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We couldn't have done it without everyone's help." As the weeks continued, the stray dogs at the market found new homes and received the care they needed. Max's health improved, and he became a happy, playful dog once again. The Johnson family's efforts had created a ripple effect, inspiring others to take action and care for those in need. One evening, as the family sat together watching the sunset, Lily looked around at her parents and "Max, we did it," she said softly. "We helped them, and they helped us too." Mr. Johnson nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "Yes, Lily. We made a difference together." Mrs. Johnson smiled, wrapping her arm around both of them. "And we'll keep making a difference, one step at a time." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the Johnson family felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced challenges, felt pain, and experienced heartbreak, but their love and determination had brought hope and healing to both their family and the stray dogs they had rescued. Together, they knew they could overcome any obstacle and continue to spread kindness and compassion wherever they went. The Johnson family had been busy since the morning they decided to rescue the stray dogs from the bustling downtown market. Their home was filled with wagging tails and happy barks as they gave each dog a safe place to stay. The sun was shining, and everything seemed perfect. But little did they know, trouble was on the way. One bright Saturday afternoon, Mr. Thompson, the owner of the market, called the Johnsons. His voice was stern and unhappy. "I need you to return those dogs immediately," he said. "They are causing problems for my business." Mrs. Johnson tried to stay calm. "We rescued them because they were hungry and scared," she replied softly. "They need a safe place, not to be treated badly." Mr. Thompson wasn't having it. "If you don't bring them back, I will take legal action against you. My business is suffering because of these strays." The Johnsons felt a knot form in their stomachs. They didn't want any trouble, but they also couldn't imagine sending the dogs back to the streets. "We understand your concern," Mr. Johnson said, "but we can't let these dogs suffer." Mr. Thompson hung up, leaving the family worried. They knew he was serious. Legal action meant court dates, fines, and a lot of stress. They didn't know how to handle it. The Johnsons sat together in the living room, trying to figure out what to do next. That evening, as the family was getting ready for bed, a loud crash echoed through the house. The door was broken down, and the family rushed to see what had happened. Their hearts pounded as they saw that someone had broken in. The living room was a mess, and some of the dogs were missing. "Oh no," cried Lily, the youngest member of the family. She hugged her favorite dog, Max, tightly. Max was a strong dog with a gentle heart, and Lily was very attached to him. "Where is Max?" Mrs. Johnson tried to stay strong. "We need to stay calm and find him," she said. "Maybe he's still inside somewhere." Mr. Johnson called the police, but it was already getting dark outside. The family searched every room, calling the names of their beloved dogs. They found some of them hiding under the bed and in the closet, scared but safe. But Max was nowhere to be found. Lily couldn't stop crying. She loved Max so much and was terrified that something bad had happened to him. The rest of the family comforted her, but their own hearts were heavy with worry. The next morning, the Johnsons received a call from Mr. Thompson again. "I heard there was a break-in," he said. "I'm sure those dogs are causing even more trouble now." Mrs. Johnson took a deep breath. "We don't know where Max is," she said sadly. "We need your help to find him." Mr. Thompson was silent for a moment. Then, he sighed. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "I want the dogs back, but I'll help you look for Max. If he's out there, we need to find him." The family felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could work together with Mr. Thompson to find Max and keep the other dogs safe. They agreed to meet at the market early the next morning to start their search. That night, the Johnsons couldn't sleep. They thought about Max and hoped he was okay. Lily kept holding her stuffed dog tightly, trying to find some comfort. Mrs. Johnson watched her children, feeling the weight of the situation. She knew they had to stay strong for each other. The next day, the family arrived at the market bright and early. Mr. Thompson was already there, looking tired and worried. "Let's split up and look for Max," he suggested. "We can cover more ground that way." The Johnsons agreed and began searching the market. They checked every stall, asked vendors if they had seen Max, and looked in every corner. The market was busy, and people were starting to notice the search for the missing dog. As the day went on, hope began to fade. They found Max's favorite spot near the fruit stand, but he wasn't there. Just when they were about to give up, a kind vendor approached them. "I saw a dog matching Max's description near the old warehouse at the edge of the market," she said. "He looked hurt but was trying to stay safe." The family thanked her and hurried to the old warehouse. It was a quiet place, with shadows stretching across the ground as the sun began to set. They called out Max's name, hoping he would respond. Suddenly, they heard a faint bark from inside the warehouse. "There he is!" Lily exclaimed, running towards the sound. They followed the noise and found Max lying on the ground, limping and scared. He looked up at them with sad eyes, and Lily rushed to his side. "Oh, Max, we're here," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The family carefully picked him up and brought him back home, where they could finally give him the care he needed. Back at their house, they cleaned Max's wounds and gave him food and water. Lily stayed by his side, comforting him as he slowly began to recover. The family felt a mix of relief and sadness. They were happy to have Max back, but the break-in and the stress had taken a toll on them. That night, as they sat together, the Johnsons realized how much they loved their new furry family members. They knew they had to keep fighting to protect them, no matter what challenges came their way. They also understood that working together with Mr. Thompson was the only way to ensure the safety and happiness of all the stray dogs. The next morning, Mr. Thompson came to their house with a serious expression. "I've been thinking," he began, "and I want to help you keep the dogs safe. I don't want any more trouble, and I believe we can find a solution that works for everyone." Mrs. Johnson felt a surge of hope. "That would be wonderful," she replied. "We've been trying to help these dogs, and we want to make sure they have a safe place to stay." Mr. Thompson nodded. "I'll use some of my resources to help you care for the dogs and find them good homes. Let's work together to make sure none of them suffer again." The family was overjoyed. They had faced so many challenges, but now they had an ally in Mr. Thompson. Together, they began to plan how to care for the dogs and find them loving families. It was a new beginning, filled with hope and determination. As they worked side by side, the Johnsons and Mr. Thompson grew closer. They shared stories, laughed together, and even shed a few tears over the dogs they loved so much. The market became a place of cooperation and kindness, where everyone worked together to ensure the well-being of the stray animals. But just as things were starting to improve, a new problem arose. One evening, as the family was settling down for the night, they heard a loud knock on their door. Mrs. Johnson opened it to find a group of angry people from the neighborhood standing outside, holding signs and shouting. "We won't stand for these stray dogs in our community," one of them yelled. "They're a nuisance and a danger." The Johnsons were shocked and confused. They had been working hard to take care of the dogs and make the community safe. They didn't understand why these people were so upset. Mr. Johnson stepped forward, trying to calm everyone down. "Please, we're doing our best to help these dogs," he said gently. "We want to make sure they are safe and happy, just like any other family member." But the crowd wasn't listening. They continued to shout and demand that the Johnsons remove the dogs from the neighborhood. The family felt their hearts sink. They didn't want to fight, but they also couldn't give up on the dogs they had rescued. As the sun set, the Johnsons sat together, feeling defeated and worried about what the future held. They had worked so hard to help the stray dogs, but now they faced a new challenge that threatened everything they had built. Lily hugged Max tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. "We can't let them take him away," she whispered. "Max is part of our family." Mrs. Johnson wiped away her own tears, determined to protect her family and the dogs they loved. "We have to find a way to show them that we're doing the right thing," she said firmly. "We can't let fear and anger tear us apart." The family knew they had to stay strong and united. They had faced many obstacles already, and they were not ready to give up. With Mr. Thompson's help, they began to plan a way to bring the community together and show everyone the importance of caring for these stray dogs. As they brainstormed ideas, the Johnsons felt a renewed sense of hope. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to do whatever it took to protect their furry friends and keep their family together. The next day, they organized a community meeting at the market. They invited everyone to come and learn about the dogs, hear their stories, and understand why the Johnsons were so passionate about helping them. It was a chance to bridge the gap and find common ground. On the day of the meeting, the market was filled with curious people. Some were skeptical, while others were willing to listen. The Johnsons stood together, ready to share their message of love and compassion for the stray dogs. Mr. Thompson took the lead, speaking earnestly about the importance of caring for animals and how the Johnsons had made a difference in the lives of these dogs. Mrs. Johnson shared heartfelt stories about each dog, explaining how they had found their way into their hearts and home. Lily spoke softly about her bond with Max, describing how he had become her best friend and a source of comfort for her. The children showed pictures and shared happy moments they had with the dogs, making it hard for anyone to stay indifferent. Slowly, the tension began to ease. People started to see the Johnsons' dedication and the positive impact they had on the community. Some even shared their own stories of pets they had lost or wanted to adopt. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had changed. The crowd was more understanding and supportive. They realized that the Johnsons were not causing problems, but were instead bringing kindness and care to the neighborhood. As the meeting concluded, a sense of unity filled the air. The Johnsons had successfully shown the community the importance of their mission. They knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time, they felt confident that they could overcome them together. That night, as the family sat together, they felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. They had faced resistance and fear, but they had also found support and understanding. The journey was far from over, but they were stronger and more determined than ever to continue helping the stray dogs they had come to love. Lily hugged Max once more, feeling the warmth and love that surrounded her. She knew that no matter what happened next, her family would always stand together, united by their love for each other and their furry friends. The Johnsons looked out the window, seeing the market filled with new hope and possibilities. They knew that their efforts were making a difference, not just for the dogs, but for the entire community. And as they drifted off to sleep, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their hearts were full of love and determination.